Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio Classics, where we listen to an old episode with a new outro and new intro, but the intro is just explaining what the outro is going to be. This episode was recommended by RageCat, Patreon supporter RageCat, so I really appreciate it. And it is a wild ride. If you have not heard this episode yet, definitely listen to it. And then if you have listened to the episode yet, just listen to it again. It's a really good episode. And then at the end of the episode, I have some thoughts about this episode to this day. This is a really interesting episode, and I'll kind of go over it. And let's get the party started. This is episode 153. You are the Yawn Machine. A Viking ship found in an unlikely location. And then we take a look at the amazing power of yawns. Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Yes. Feel the relaxing power of the yawn. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you're having a great day too. Just a quick update if you missed yesterday's episode. Today is the season finale of Dead Rabbit Radio Season 3. We're going to be taking a week off. I know it's short notice. It wasn't my original plan. I wanted to go a little bit longer because I have a vacation coming up in February, but 50 episodes is a lot. It's a 10-week work schedule. So this is where I've been taking my breaks. It feels right to take a break. I'll take a shorter break in February. I apologize, but we just got to take a break right now. So let's go ahead and move on to our first story. Now, my little yawning exercise has gotten me a little tired, but we got a lot to talk about. The power of yawns, especially coming up. But first off, we're going back to the year 1933. That was a time warp. I don't know. It sounded like we were just spinning around and disappeared. But anyway, so we're back in the year 1933. And we are in an unusual place for this kind of story. We are in the Anza Borrego Desert. Now, you might recognize the name of that desert. We've been there a couple times. That's where the giant skeleton was walking around. That was in Arizona. I guess the desert borders like Arizona and California, because some of the stories say they're in California, some of the stories say they're in Arizona, but in this particular story, I believe we're still in Arizona. Now, there's a woman in 1933. Her name is Myrtle Botts, which was a ridiculous name even for that time period. Come on. I don't understand at what point did people think it was okay to start calling their kids Myrtle and Ethel. I mean, I'd much rather have like a Jasmine or a Bella nowadays. But Myrtle Botts was a woman. She was hiking with her husband through the Anza Borrego Desert. So this prospector shows up and he's like, I just saw something crazy. No, it wasn't an 8-foot-tall skeleton with a glowing lantern in its chest. That's what my buddy saw. But I saw a boat with the head of a snake. Myrtle and her husband were like, what? He's like, yeah, I saw a huge boat with the head of a snake, and it actually had shields on the side of this boat. Now I'm going to assume this prospector isn't one of our learned prospectors that we've had run-ins with the past, but this guy, what he's obviously describing is some sort of Viking ship. At least the stereotypical depiction of a Viking ship, but he didn't call it a Viking ship. Now, Myrtle and her husband were familiar with that depiction. And, I mean, if you've seen a drawing of it, you know what they look like. So they're like, where did you see this boat? And they're trying to suss out if this guy's crazy or not. They're trying to figure out if this guy's going to, like, take a hatchet to him. And he said he saw it lodged into the side of a canyon. So now the story's getting even weirder, but Myrtle and her husband are pretty intrigued by what's going on. So they said, okay, we know where that canyon's at. It's actually Canbrake Canyon. Or can you? But anyways, I probably pronounced it wrong and that joke doesn't make any sense, but they said, okay, we'll go out and check that out. So what happened then was that they went with the prospector and they also saw the ship, and it was a Viking ship. Snakehead, shields on the side of it, and it was lodged into this canyon. They're like, that's amazing. This is the archaeological find of the decade, century probably, because we had a Viking ship on the west coast, and far predating any knowledge of Vikings being in the area. Now, at that time, they're like, well, we want to go down there and get a closer look at it, but we have to go back and get some provisions. So they pack up their stuff, they hike back to their camp, and they're like, I can't wait to get to that Viking ship tomorrow. Now, my question is that it's 1933, so I don't think they had cameras. I don't think they were carting those around. If you found a Viking ship in the middle of nowhere, like lodged into a canyon, I would want to climb on top of it. I would not like King Kong or nothing, but I would want to walk around on it. That'd be my first instinct, is like come through the canyon and then like walk around and check out the boat. But is a boat that's trapped in a canyon more or less likely to fall apart than like an old boat still floating around? I guess I just answered my question because the old boat would be all rotted, but like, would you be able to walk on a boat that had been dry docked for centuries? But she saw the boat, her husband saw the boat, the prospector saw the boat, but when they were getting ready to pack up to go back to get a closer look at it, there was a 6.4 earthquake in the area. Couldn't find the ship after that. Ship's completely gone. Now, what's interesting about that is this part of the desert actually did used to be connected to the ocean. And natives in the area, not only do they have legends of men who came on a boat with the head of a snake, but sometimes in the native population, children will be born with blonde hair and blue eyes. Now, I don't know a lot about genetics, but isn't that possible anyways? I guess not. I mean, I guess you would need to have those genes introduced into your gene pool. But the fact that sometimes natives are born with blonde hair, blue eyes, and the fact that there's old native legends of men arriving on a ship with this head of a snake, people, well, I shouldn't say people. Well, I should say people because they're people, but it's not like scientists believe this. But people think in the area that Vikings may have come there. May have come there and interacted with these tribes way, way before we ever thought there were Vikings in America. And definitely no Vikings on the West Coast. It's interesting because there is kind of a precedence for this. I mean, there's been found boats in the middle of deserts and stuff like that, but boats showing up in really odd locations, places you wouldn't ever have expected them. So, World Trade Center, for one. The World Trade Center is knocked down on September 11th by two planes. Try not to laugh. I was going to make a joke and I said not to. And the buildings returned to rubble. And when they started to dig up the land to build One World Trade Center, I think it's called, or One Trade Center, they had to dig deep in to get this foundation. They found a boat underneath the World Trade Center. And it was a sloop. It was a little sailing boat. Now, I had to look up what a sloop was, but a sloop is a little sailing boat. So they found the boat down underneath the World Trade Center. And nobody ever knew it was there. It was underneath all the concrete and street and plumbing and everything like that. It's only when they dug deep enough they found this sloop. This sloop was made of the same wood that Independence Hall was made out of. Like this boat is like 300 years, well, not that old. Yeah, it'd be about 300 years old. And they had to do all these tests on it. They're like, where's this wood come from? They trace it back to this forest in the East Coast. But they're like, these other monuments were made from this same forest of wood. So they knew it was a really old boat, but they don't know how it got there. They don't know if it was just kind of sailing around the water there and got damaged and everyone was just like, screw it. And they jumped out and just left it there. Or, funnier, if someone was just like, I don't like this boat anymore and just dropped it there to basically become like landfill. Like, they're like, we just got to fill stuff up here. So they dropped it, threw a bunch of junk on it, eventually made part of New York. They don't know. They just know that the boat is close to 300 years old. Now that I say that, how could they not know that? Because they know, like, they'd have pretty detailed records of, like, bashing stuff around in New York to make it bigger. I know it used to be smaller, right? And then they, like, put a bunch of junk around it? Oh, man. Season 3 is ending with a bang, isn't it, guys? I also found out in my sloop-related research that there is a vehicle, a boat, known as the Sloop of War. Can you really think of a less menacing name for your vehicle? Sloop of War. Uh-oh. How can you be afraid of those things? I don't care if they'd have 100 cannons on them. How could you be afraid of anything called a sloop? Watch out, he has a sloop cannon. That's not scary. He's going to stab me with his sloop. That's not... But apparently, and I think this part's totally made up, apparently there are sightings of a ghost Viking boat sailing across the desert. I don't believe that at all. And some people think that the boat in the side of the canyon was also a ghost boat. And not everything has to be ghosts. Not everything has to be ghosts, dude. It's just a boat. It's a boat. That's enough of a mystery. Why do you have to add ghosts to it? It's enough of a mystery. Although I do have to say it is kind of weird. You know, you talk about like Native American curses and stuff like that. When people finally do discover this boat, there's a massive earthquake in the area. Boat's never found. And technically, the boat's still out there. They just couldn't find it again. Or they made the whole thing up. I don't know. But there's actually a lot of interesting articles about it. Let's go ahead and move on here. So this was recommended to me in a roundabout way by Ramsey via Gmail. Now, he recommended that I do a story on Paul Adams and his food replicator, which I will, which is fascinating in and of itself. But first I have to talk about the Yawn machine. Now, Paul Adams, so thanks Ramsey for the lead, and it's the same guy, Paul Adams and his food replicator. He also has a yawn machine. He also has a robot, but we'll get to that in a second. Paul Adams is a man who is pioneering the power of yawns. But before I get into his Yawn Therapy, let's go ahead and take a look at him in his own words. So just to let you know, this guy is asking you to trust him implicitly on all forms of therapy, at least the Yawn Therapy. But he gets kind of into it. This is the guy we're going to trust here. Paul Adams, this is in his own words. I am easy to find online. I have a bunch of websites such as Yawn Guy, Paul's Robot 3, Yawn and Grow Rich, Paul's Rabbit, and more. I've looked at all of those, and it's a lot to unpack, but I also have 20,000 forum posts on related topics, most with the username Dole Old Fart. So I don't want to get too much into the food replication stuff, but he wants us to make our own food. But in this particular segment, he wants us to trust him and his psychological evaluation of the power of yawns, and yet he posts under the name Dole Old Fart. Here's the thing. You can set up... that's fine that he has that username. And he can comment on like Three's Company websites or whatever he wants to do with Dole Old Fart. But when he starts putting forum posts up about yawn and grow rich, trying to help us achieve a greater mental state, don't do it under Dole Old Fart. That is the grossest combination of words. Old Fart implies that it's been sitting around for 3 days. And the fact that it's dull, I don't think that it's boring. I think it's like almost like a dull force, just kind of sitting on you. Ugh. I guess that's not really the definition of dull. But anyways, Dole Old Fart, I'm not going to take advice from you. 20,000 forum posts, I don't even know what to comment on that. How do you really write 20,000 forum posts related to yawning? So, what is the yawn machine? You are the yawn machine, apparently. I've been all over his websites and I couldn't find like a box or some sort of mechanical device called a yawn machine. You are the yawn machine. Now, let's read a little bit off of his website. And again, you're like, Jason, I don't subscribe to your podcast to hear you make fun of people who obviously are having some issues. And I know that. But yawning is the way we counter sleep. A yawn defends against sleep. Now, neither of those are true by any measure at all. Yawning, that's the complete opposite of the form of the yawn. But if he's a backyard scientist, I get it. He's trying to come up with a new reason for why yawning works. We'll give him that. It accompanies the release of unconsciousness, a lessening of the dark energy threatening to overwhelm you, a draining of the engulfing. Now, on his website, he has his version of Franz, where he'll be writing and then an other person jumps in and interrupts his writing. It's super bizarre. This is from yawnmachine.com. It accompanies a release of unconsciousness, a lessening of the dark energy threatening to overwhelm you, a draining of the engulfing. Cut the crap! What's it all about? And be brief, I haven't got all day. So he interrupts himself. And the person who's interrupting him is quite rude. It's not like a frequently asked questions where people are like, what's the yawn machine? How does it work? What if no, it's a guy who interrupts him. And this is the beginning of his website. It's a guy who interrupts him and tells him, cut the crap. Now, he says, the other guy says, what's all about it? Be brief, I haven't got all day. This is his response. This is 3 inches into his webpage. Okay. You're sure you're not underage? Why does that matter, dude? You're talking about yawning. What? Why does it matter? That's creepy. That's creepy. He could say, listen, you have to be over 18 to experience the full power of yawns. That's one way to phrase it. The wrong way to phrase it is, you sure you're not underage? That's what people say on To Catch a Predator. He goes, okay, you're sure you're not underage, not tired, not hungry, not ill, not under the influence, and not mentally on edge? Well, I don't know what any of that has to do with being underage. I really don't know what any of that has to do with yawning, and I'm a little concerned you're asking these questions right off the bat when this is supposed to be safe, and you're asking, you're not hungry, right? Okay, I am. I go eat a sandwich, I come back, I'm like, okay, I'm good. Let's keep going. Here we get into the meat of it. Remember, the idea is to encourage yawns, not suppress them. You don't have to force them, but don't try and stop them coming either. Here we go. Touch stuff. All caps. Touch stuff. With your hands. Guys, you can do this if you want. I'm personally not telling you to. But touch stuff. With your hands, touch the table firmly. Rub your hands together hard. Yawn. Rub your arms, rub your legs, rub your chest, yawn. Squeeze the sides of the chair. Rub your feet on the carpet, tap your fingernails on the table, stamp your feet, scratch your head, even stretch. This kind of thing. Okay, it's kind of vague. Do whatever makes you yawn right now. But touch stuff. Don't just think about it, but actually touch stuff. And yawn. Yawn, yawn, yawn. This is just residual stress coming off. So, his yawn therapy, it's also called yawn and rub therapy, or yawn and stretch therapy. I knew this was going to happen. I read this article a while back, and it said, people who yawn when other people yawn are more empathetic. And people... It's like a gauge. So if somebody yawns and the other person doesn't yawn, it can mean sometimes that they're not a very empathetic person. But if they do repeat the yawn, that means they tend to have more empathy. That's what I've heard. I've also heard a version that if your yawns make other people yawn, that means you're more of a leader. But maybe you're just more a bunch of empathetic people. I don't know. It seems kind of weird if that works. But we should find out. We should have like a president yawn and see if like 43 million Americans yawn at the same time. But back to this thing. So you stretch and you rub and you yawn. And later on in the site, he says you can also burp and sigh. And it's really just a way, you're basically like moving the energy around in your body. Like right now I'm rubbing my legs. Oh, yawning. Man, what a humdinger of a season finale, huh? Everyone's just yawning now. Unless you're not empathetic. I'm rubbing my knees, I'm rubbing my legs. Now, I can see yawning in a sense being relaxing, but I think it's relaxing because it's making you tired. Now, he has a Paul's robot. He has a robot, so if you're having trouble just following along with me, you can actually download a program onto your computer from this dude. Dull old fart. You can download a program and a .exe file onto your computer, and it is Paul's robot. Now, of course, I had to check it out, and of course not. I did not download it, but he does have an informative YouTube video where he shows how it works, and that's all I needed to know. It's a Word document on one side of your screen and a series of really loud audio messages on the right side of your screen, and the right side, it'll be like... Right side of your screen will be like, okay, now yawn. And you're like, oh, I can't yawn. I'm scared because you're yelling at me, computer man. But you type in code, and it'll be like, what are you afraid of right now? Now, it's so funny because One, the video is 13 minutes long, and it's 13 minutes of a dude yawning. And in the video description, he says, I know the yawning gets a little too much in the video. So he's just yawning the whole time he's doing this video. But when he's talking to Paul's robot, and again, it's just like a set of slideshows that he's named a robot. It doesn't seem like you can interact with it much. But one of the questions was something about a bad memory. Now, he's older than me. I'm 42. He has to be like in his late 50s minimum. He puts down for like a bad memory or something that's bugging him. I don't remember the exact context, but again, it doesn't matter. It had to do with negative emotions. He's older than me. He's in his 50s. Beaten up at school. Okay. I know people have had really bad school experiences. But by the time you hit 55, if that's the biggest complaint you have in your life, that you were beaten up at school, you're doing pretty good. You're doing pretty good. And I was both a bully and the bullied, depending on which grade I was in and which school. We moved almost every 2 years. So I was constantly the new kid. I constantly kind of had to fight my way. I was never the cool kid, but I usually had to like fight my way to not being bullied. And then eventually I would start bullying people. Like that was just the cycle. Up until about 2 years ago. No, I'm just joking. But I mean, like that was you had to prove your worth. I wasn't like a lunch money bully, but I was like a dick to kids who I felt deserved to be a dick. I never like picked on little kids, but I started trouble with other kids. But I was constant. Every time we moved, I had to get back from like, great, I'm going to get bullied now, and I kind of had to like fight my way out of that. And this was back in the 80s, so literally fighting. You're boxing as the teacher smoked a cigarette and watching you guys, and then flicks it away and breaks it up. I know that you guys see that scene in movies. That was fairly common in my childhood. Now, it's not just about yawning. You have to visualize your problems while you're yawning, and you got to visualize them walking away from you. Now, actually, I just had a good point. If this therapy works so good, why is he still upset about something that happened 40 years ago? Or more. But anyways, you rub your body, you yawn, and you imagine your bad feelings go away. That can work in a sense. I remember I used to have this thing. This episode's becoming oddly personal. I used to have this thing that whenever I was suffered some sort of heartbreak or some sort of loss, I would imagine myself, in my head, I would imagine myself putting all those memories in a box and closing the box, and then the box folding basically into nothingness. The box kept folding upon itself until I couldn't see it anymore. And it was like all my worries went away. Like if a girl broke my heart, I would take like her birthday and her name and pictures of her in my head and memories, and I'd put them in this box and I'd seal it, and then I'd watch it go doot, 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 doot. Just shrink it to nothingness. That was the way I dealt with it. It's probably not a good way to deal with it, because all those emotions are still in there somewhere, but I just forget. I remember I always knew I was getting over a girl when I forgot her middle name. That was the first sign. Oh, those girls who broke my heart. Eventually, the first thing I would do is I would just start. Sometimes I would imagine their. This is a deeply personal episode. Sometimes I would imagine a girl's face, and I would imagine pixels going out one by one until it was black. Both of those really help, actually. Both of those really help me. Maybe not in the long term. I feel like I'm doing good. I don't remember any of those girls. But yeah, I just would blank it out. I'd visualize it leaving. So I get where he's coming from. The whole yawning stuff, though, is just... It just doesn't make sense to me. If anything, it's the meditation already makes you fall asleep, and now you want me to yawn while I'm meditating? I'm gonna fall asleep before I get anything done. He also has ways you can get rid of bad negative feelings about people, specific ways, because the yawn therapy is just kind of an overall, I hate my job. And then you see your job leaving you. Actually, you're leaving your job because they fired you because you were yawning all day and you work at a call center. Anyways, so you can do it for particular people or you can do it for places. So you probably know what's coming with the places, but he gives this step-by-step process for people relief. Here's people relief. Step 1. In a session, he wrote in session, but whatever. In a session, Make a written list of people or groups who you feel have been hostile to you or are hostile to you right now. When I first read that, I was like, so basically, like, racists, right? I mean, like, I can understand people having issues with other people, but generally when people have issues with other groups, it's either I don't like the government, I don't like the police, or I don't like this ethnic group or religion. So, I mean, unless a bunch of, like, racist dudes are just sitting around going, oh, and just yawning away their feelings of hatred, there's not many groups. He has a few that he's listed. But there's not many groups that I'm like, oh man, I really hate the IRS. Like, ooh. Anyways, make a written list of, don't do this, guys, because this is going to put you on a government watch list. Don't make a list of people or groups who have been hostile to you. And definitely don't do his next step. As you write down the names, put 1, 2, or 3 crosses next to the name. Don't do this, depending on the level of hostility or bad feeling. This is a serial killer list. This is a school shooting checklist. Do not do this under any circumstances. Do not follow this guy's advice. This is his sample list. No joke. This is what he wrote down as a sample list. First name, Mary. 3 X's. Most likely generic. That's most likely a generic name, if Mary's a generic name. James. 2 X's. Again, probably just a sample generic name. His third list down, his third entry down on his list of things that have been hostile to him, the groups of people who've been hostile to him or people. The first 2 were most likely just examples, but they may be real people. He may really have a problem with Mary and kind of a problem with James. But again, you're making this list for people to read and to look at and go, yes, I want to do this therapy. I trust you, Paul Adams. He has Mary, 3 X's. He has James, 2 X's. The third one, you'll never guess what it is, ever. That demon that no one will believe me about. 2 X's. What in the world is this guy talking about? That is not a sample list anymore. At all. If it was, it probably was in the beginning. That demon that no one will believe me about. Now, what's weird? Okay, that's an understatement. There's a couple things weird about this. And this episode's going to go long. I'm sorry, it's the end of the season. And I love this story. That demon that no one will believe me about. The 2 X's are in regard to the demon. But he hates it less than Mary? On your website where you're trying to sell me a therapy, if I was looking online for a therapist, and the therapist ad is like, we handle, marital counseling, adoption stuff, stress, demonic activity, I'd be like, whoa, you just can't slide that in there. Like, that's pretty bold to put that out right away. He doesn't like Mary a lot. He kind of doesn't like James. He kind of doesn't like the demon. And the fact that he added that no one will believe me about tells me that he's been walking around telling people about a demon and nobody believes him. He could have just put the demonic forces around me, or he could have just put a demon, and that would have been weird too. But the fact that we have that qualifier, it's not just a demon. It's a demon that no one believes him about. That's so weird. This guy must be telling people he sees a demon, and they're like, what? And he's like adding X's to their names. Number 4, this is where I think it's not examples anymore. So we had Mary, James, the demon no one will believe me about. Number 4, and I'm not going to get into why this is on here. Uncle Frank, 3 X's. Uncle Frank is higher on the list than the demon that no one will believe him about. 3 X's on Uncle Frank. Next on the list is God, 2 X's. Weird. And after that, Mother. It's very formal. Mother, 2 X's. And then the church group, single X. Now, I'm going to assume that the church group gets an X because they don't believe him about the demon that's floating around him. And then there's a few other ones after that. Josie, that nasty guy in the corner store, Anne and George. And oddly enough, George has one X and a question mark next to it. So is he thinking about removing the X or adding an X? Don't do this, guys. This is real dangerous to write a list like this. Now, he gives us a note. He actually says note on this part. And I can't make heads or tails of this. Note that you are addressing the hostile side of the person as he, she appears to you. Okay. So if I want these negative feelings to go away, I'm imagining their hostility towards me. And that's fair enough. But then he goes, for example, and we didn't need the example. For example, if you are a guy and you are addressing a girl you used to know who gave you trouble, do the creative bit with her acting hostile to you. Should be a period there, right? That should be the end of the sentence, right? He's made his point, but it doesn't. He doesn't end there. He says the stuff about the girl, do the creative bit with her acting hostile to you, comma, not with her smiling and taking her clothes off. So he's yawning, rubbing himself. He's trying to picture this girl being hostile to him. Does he sometimes imagine her taking her clothes off? Would you, if you were, that totally boggled my mind. I'm like, I already don't know where we're at in this yawn therapy. And now he's telling us, he's given us a note that I never would have thought of. Yawning and rubbing yourself and imagining someone you hate taking their clothes off. I guess, maybe, if you had a fetish for yawning. That I was like, why add that part? You made your point. That seems to be very common here. He'll make a relatively, interesting thing about, visualization. Then he's like, touch your chair. He also said this later on in the website. He said, if you do this therapy correctly, the next time you see that person, you may want to give him a big old hug. Because it's totally discharge all your negative energy. Maybe. I don't know. Probably not. If they didn't believe the demon existed yesterday and you do the yawn therapy, they're still not going to believe the demon existed today. I don't think that's going to change much, but he was saying that by discharging all this negative energy, you get over it. He also has the same process. We went over the people relief. This is the places relief. You do the same process with the location. You imagine it, you yawn, you rub yourself, and you think about how it was hostile to you. You're helping to discharge that energy. Guess what the number one place is? And this is where I was like, the first one when he was like, oh, I was beaten up at school. I was thinking, that could just be an example. It's a little weird. It's a little weird to go that. Most people would say if you were making it for modern people or, older people, you'd say trouble at work, marital trouble, stuff like that. That's stuff that older people can deal with or can relate to more than being beaten up in school. So first I was like, well, maybe there's just a one-off thing. When he does his locations, his first location is school, 3 X's. So he hates it more than the demon that no one will believe him about. His most hated location is school. Tied with school. And it wasn't like a particular school. It was just school in general, 3 X's. He had one other location that has 3 X's. The parking lot where I got mugged. Now, I don't think that's an example at all. I think it was a place where he actually got mugged and he puts it on par with school. 3 X's for the parking lot where I got mugged. We got 2 X's for my first workplace. So it seems like he has some hostile energy from his youth, which is kind of sad. I think there's other workable therapies out there that he could take advantage of other than just yawning in your chair. My first workplace got 2 X's. Dental office got 2 X's. Okay, But then he has 3 other locations. He has the IRS office. It's very stressful to people. Hospital. That's fair enough. I can see people have bad experience with that. Larry's gym. Larry's gym got an X. Out of all the locations that this man has wandered through his life, Larry's gym. I don't know what happened there. I don't know when it happened. I don't want to know what happened at Larry's gym. That puts the gym, Larry's gym, on par. Think about this. Larry's gym, whatever happened there, is on par, on the same level as an an IRS office and a hospital where people get sick and die. That's how much he hates Larry's Gym. When you go to a hospital, it either means that you're having a really bad time or someone you know is having a really bad time. IRS, again, if you're in the office, you're not having the best month. But what could possibly go wrong at Larry's Gym that puts it on the level of a hospital? Unless he ended up in the hospital from Larry's Gym, I don't want to know. I don't want to know what happened. And when somebody's really into visualization, they tend to go back to the classics. I've talked about this, and I've actually recommended it personally to people as well. The Science of Getting Rich is the best visualization book I've ever read. It was actually the first visualization book I ever read. And since then, I've read other ones, and they're not as good. The Science of Getting Rich is written in the late 1800s by a minister? His name was Wallace Wattles, and oddly enough, he changed his name to that. That wasn't his birth name. He wanted the name Wallace Wattles. And I might actually do a reading of that book sometime and just having it as a little audiobook, podcast, whatever. Because it's public domain. It's a great book. But that is the kind of the granddaddy of them. But there's another book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which again is a lot about visualization. Now, both The Science of Getting Rich and Think and Grow Rich, and Think and Grow Rich is based on Science of Getting Rich, but it's about visualization and hard work. Same thing with bodybuilding. You have to visualize yourself getting buff, but you got to put in the time too. That's what a lot of stuff like The Secret leaves out. You got to work really hard. Like I said on a previous podcast, if I visualize being a successful podcaster, which oddly enough, I haven't been doing much of lately. I kind of have lost that. I need to get back into that. And I think the show's... Well, I think also I'm just getting burned out, and that's why it's good to take the break, but... Where was I going with that? If I just visualize being a successful podcaster, having a lot of listeners and getting the great listener feedback that I do, but never recorded a podcast, it wouldn't work. You got to do both. You have to do both. Otherwise, you're just recording a podcast and no one's listening. It's really weird, and I believe it, but, skeptical. It's fine. Where am I going with this? Well, Napoleon Hill's Think or Grow Rich, I believe, is also public domain at this time. I think it was written in, the 20s. Paul Adams wrote... Yawn and Grow Rich. Yawn and Grow Rich. Now, you're thinking, whoa, Jason, he wrote a book? He wrote a book on par with Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, one of the leading self-starting business books? Well, kinda. He took a copy of Think and Grow Rich and just entered in text in blue his thoughts about yawning. He just adds yawning the whole time. Oh, do this part you just read, but yawn. The book's a mess. It's unreadable. It's absolutely unreadable. Because you read maybe 2 sentences of what Napoleon Hill wrote that have stood the test of time, and then in blue underneath it, it's like, yeah, just rub your chair and yawn. That is a bastardization of what he wrote. I honestly, at the point when I was reading Yawn and Grow Rich, I was starting to pull my hair out. I was really starting to lose patience with this guy. His websites are a mess. His websites are classic HTML 3-column. So you on one side, to say they're not updated for mobile browsers is an understatement. One side of the screen, probably about a good 2 inches of it, is reader testimonials of whatever nonsense he's talking about. And then he has maybe about 5 or 6 inches of crammed in text. And then the remaining 3 inches on the right side of the screen, so you have it on the left side, the right side, 3 columns, are more testimonials from people, which I can almost guarantee are trolls. Being, you know what? I yawned and my petunia started to grow. Thanks, Paul. I can almost guarantee that they're trolls. Either a lot of people really, really like yawning, or people are messing with them at this point. The reason why this is ridiculous, it's ridiculous on the face of it, but when he's trying to sell it as some sort of therapy, I think it can be dangerous, because I think a lot of people are suffering with stuff, and this isn't going to help. This isn't going to help anybody. This isn't going to help him. It's not. We'll go into him further when we talk about the food replicator, but I don't think it'll help anyone else. But I will say this. The time that I spent on this guy's websites, and again, he has a lot of them, I was very entertained and very happy, and I laughed a lot. So, Paul Adams, Thank you for that. You did brighten my day. I didn't yawn. I didn't sigh. I didn't rub stuff. But I had a good laugh. A little bit at your expense. Well, a lot at your expense, but I truly hope that as we go into season 4, you continue to be healthy and have a long life. And the reason why I say that while I'm laughing is because last I saw, he's still eating food out of his magical food replicator. And he's losing weight. And he's not doing too good. It's on his latest blog. But we will come back to the food replicator next season. We'll see his other invention of how to take 2 tin cans, a string, a few other little instruments that in no way are used for food preparation, and how to take the essence of food from one can into the other. You don't eat the moldy food, you eat this new substance that appears. So yeah, we got a lot more craziness coming up next season, and we're going to, if you got any requests, send them in, because I'm prepping request week. That's how we're going to come back with season 4. I already got a ton of requests, and I know which ones, I know for the most part which ones I'm going to do. But if you got some, send them over. Dead Rabbit, you know the stuff. Let me start the exit here. Go ahead and cue music right now. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be your email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. Twitter is @JasonOCarpenter. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm glad you listened to it today. I'm glad you listened to seasons 1, 2, and 3. We're going to be starting season 4 soon. Have a great weekend, guys. Okay, so that was You Are the Yawn Machine. Our time spent with Paul Adams. Let's take a look at this episode here. Let's kind of break it down in order. I'll get to the Paul Adams stuff. And again, I want to thank Rage Cat for recommending this episode. You know what's funny is that since I've opened it up to have Patreon suggest their episodes, their favorite episodes to be included in the Classics Week, I've noticed a trend. A lot of them are at the end of this season when I'm completely burned out. When I'm completely done with the show. The last 15 episodes, really the last 15 to 20 episodes of a season, basically half the season, I'm starting to get burned out. And I am trying to deliver daily quality content by myself. You guys send me stories, and that's amazing. I'm not belittling that at all. Getting the research together, recording the episode, editing it, it takes a toll. It really does kind of take a toll on you. By the end of the season, I'm completely tapped out. And I think it's really interesting is a lot of the episodes we've covered in Classics Weeks are end of the season. So I don't know if it's somehow I'm able to get reinvigorated. I don't know if it's necessity is the mother of invention. I'm not for sure. And we'll go more into that when we talk about the Yawn Machine. But I really like this episode. The first story is about the Viking ship. I don't know if I was able to convey in the episode itself how much I love that story. I remember hearing that story back in the 90s when I was reading my National Directory of Haunted Places book. And I obviously was able to find way more detail. There was just a paragraph of it in the book, but that's one of my favorite stories. I don't know if it's one of my favorite stories I've ever covered on the podcast, but I think it's definitely one of my favorite stories pre-podcast. If that makes sense. Hearing about it back in the 90s, it filled my imagination with all of these stories. How did the boat get there? Was it real? Not did they make it up, but was it a ghost boat? Was it a physical boat? Was it a curse because it was found and then that massive earthquake happened and then it was never found again? I think when I re-listened to the episode and I still have this mental idea of how much I love that story. It's super evocative. It's something that I've loved for 20 years. I have a little picture of it. I have a little picture of it by my bedstand, a little Viking boat. And I'm glad that this is one of the cool things about the podcast. I'm able to share those stories with you. It might be one of my favorite stories I've told on Dead Rabbit Radio, honestly. I think it's a well done, well produced segment. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then it goes into the weird boat found at the World Trade Center. I think it's just a well put together segment. But that's not why you're here. That's not why anyone is here. We're here for the Yawn Machine. And there's an interesting backstory to this as well. So again, Rage Cat, I'm really happy that you picked this episode. The background to this episode is that Ramsey, I believe it was Ramsey, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but I believe Ramsey sent me the story for the food replicator. He found this weird website about a guy who had built a food replicator. We're always looking for the next Hans character, right? We're always looking for the next person with a totally weird, obscure belief. There's not a lot of them. You think there would be more of them. It's not just that they have an obscure or weird belief, it's that they have to be earnest about it. It has to fit the show. I don't want to just talk about some guys like weirdo, like made up catalytic converter or something like that. Or Time Cube is another one. I'm just like, it's been covered 100 times. It's super dense. But Hans does this. We have the guy who made the hats that were supposed to like keep aliens from getting in your head and make it so like your kids wouldn't have autism. That's a really dangerous belief too. I wish they didn't exist, but I like to find these crackpot theories that are actually harmful and expose those. But the food replicator, man, I remember I got this from Ramsey, and we're at the end of the season, or we're coming up to the end of the season. And usually at the end of the season, I've fixed this problem, but a lot of times I'm running out of stories. I'm not. What I mean when I say I'm running out of stories is I don't have enough stories prepped. I don't have enough stories prepped and ready to go. I have notes, or maybe I don't have notes. Maybe I just have an article bookmarked. He sends me this food replicator, I think midway through the season, honestly. I'd been sitting on it for a while, and it was so dense. It was so much information, and I knew that there was gold here. But to take all of that information and turn it into a 15, 20, even if I did a solo episode on it, a 35-minute episode, it's still a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But I'm getting desperate for... I remember this. I remember recording this. I started getting really desperate for content. And it's funny because think about it. I have to have an episode. I have to have these daily episodes. I can't go, I didn't find anything, guys, because then people just stop tuning into the show. So I remember going, oh man, what am I going to do? And so what did I do? I found a story that I knew was a banger right out the hit. Like I was just going through my head. I was like, dude, that Viking boat. It has beginning, middle, and the end. It's super evocative. I love it. I know where the source material at. It's pretty well covered in the media. Not like CNN was there, but it was in this book. And I'm looking at all my other notes, and there was just nothing. There was nothing. I couldn't think of anything, and I was thinking I could do the food replicator, but it was so much information. So I compromised. I said, we're going to do this Paul Adams character because he has all these different inventions. And I remember we go, and it's funny because the next episode, the Classics episode, we're going to do the food replicator because I think they're great back to back. But this one, I had to do an episode, and I needed something good and quick. And it was the Yawn Machine. I remember I was kind of looking through this stuff. Ramsey had highlighted the Yawn Machine as well. It's not like he just sent me a giant encyclopedia and goes, "Here you go, dork. Read this." And this is one of those episodes that I can hear the tone in my voice when I'm recording it, at least when I started. And if I remember correctly, too, this did happen, actually. I could probably verify it going through the source file, but this was an episode that I think I had to record twice, which is a horrible experience. It happens it happens, I won't say it's not rare. We'll put it that way. It happens a couple times this season where I will record. The first segment was totally fine, but if I remember correctly, this happened with Monkeys Don't Exist. This happened with Franz as well. I recorded the Yawn Machine, and it sucked. Like, I went through 10, 15, 20 minutes, and it sucked. I actually just did that the other day, too. That's not something you really learn. There was an episode I did just recently. I don't remember. I remember recording it and looking, I was like, it would take me longer to edit this than it would just to re-record it. I'm looking at all the notes. At this point, I've taken his website and turned it into easy-to-digest notes that I read off the screen. There's no script. So I remember recording it, and it wasn't great, because there's a lot of information you have to lay out. And this version of it, the final version of it, I think works. Like, I think I did have to do it once and realize what information is useful and what information. And when I say I'm recording them back to back, I'm not getting up. It's not like I'm taking a day off. The episodes do. I'll sit there, record an episode for 20 minutes, go, oh, this stinks, and then I usually will stop it. Obviously stop it. I know how to work a recording thing. I'll keep that original recording usually, just in case something happens. In case I want to release garbage. But then I just start recording over again, and it's fresh, kind of like I know which stuff works and which stuff doesn't. And this is one of those episodes where I can kind of hear that tone in my voice, where even on the second draft, I'm thinking, does this work? I can hear those different mental states. I'll hear stuff and go, dude, I know this isn't working. I've listened to episodes and I can hear like something in my voice. There's a hint of desperation. I'm thinking, yeah, you knew it wasn't working. Hopefully you recover by the end of the episode. And for me, this episode, it stands out for a couple reasons. One, I just love the idea of the Yawn machine itself. I think I'm kind of glossing over the fact that a guy invented You are the Yawn machine. Everything he says about it is ridiculous. That yawn, what was it again? Yawning prevents sleep or something like that. I got a lot of cool yawn facts in there that I've been carrying around in my pocket. The whole stuff about yawns making you empathetic, or if you yawn when other people yawn, that means you're empathetic. Those are things I've been telling people. Like, I always have these weird, can you believe it? I have weird bits of information I just drop in the middle of conversations. I'm that guy. So I was able to kind of sprinkle that stuff in. I think it's really funny because I'm talking about this machine, the Yawn machine, and he's saying that it like helps you become emotional and helps you get over like bullying stuff. He's talking about being bullied as a kid. And then I start opening up emotionally. And I didn't realize this when I recorded it. I don't think so. I don't think I'm referencing it in the episode. I say in the episode this is an oddly personal episode. I talk about how I deal with heartbreak. I talk about my childhood, how I used to move schools all the time and I would be bullied and then become the bully. And it's funny, when I was listening to that, I was like, Jason, you better explain what you mean by becoming a bully. I was going on and I was like, Jason, you did explain that you like only bullied people who deserved it, right? You're not... And then after 15 minutes, I go, oh, by the way, I only bullied people. I got in fights is kind of what that meant. Like, someone was, picking on someone was being a jerk, we'd get in a fight. I wasn't shaking down kids for their lunch money. But I was like, dude, please say that you're not that kind of bully. I'm a jerk, but, I'm a jerk of justice. It was weird talking about all the yawning I was doing, and he was saying how it was like to open up the emotions, and then I was actually opening it up emotionally, and I was re-listening to it for the classics. I go, that's really interesting, actually. Like, why am I revealing this information? Is a revealing episode. I was like, oh yeah, when I want to forget about a girl, I know the pixel one. I've done that before. I'd imagine a picture of the girl, and I'd imagine the pixels going out until there was nothing but a black screen. And then the other thing, I know I'm getting over a girl when I forget her middle name. Like, that's all deeply personal stuff. So it was interesting. An episode about a man saying this opens you up emotionally, and I'm opening up emotionally. But for me, the best part of this episode, and it's funny because I didn't know if the episode was going to work when I was recording it. I had an ace in my pocket. I remember when I was going through his website, when I was compiling my notes, I was laughing so hard. And I knew, I go, you have to set up the Yawn machine, because that's the way the show is. You're not just going, this is dumb, and you have to set it up to show why it's ridiculous. The stars, the checklist thing, that whole bit about Larry's gym, the demon no one will believe me about, and Mary. And I remember I just stumbled across it on his website, and I was laughing so hard. And that was the thing. I go, I can't wait to share that with you guys. Like, that's when I know that the story has potential. The same thing with the Viking ship. That is something that I've always loved, that story. if I can't wait to it doesn't happen all the time. Like most of the time, if I'm recording the episode, it's something that I want to tell you about. But there are some stories that I almost can't wait to tell you about, that I'm like, oh dude, I wish I could just record this right now. So this was very interesting to have that feeling at the end of the season. And I knew the setup, I had to set up what the Yawn Machine was. And the second draft was better than the first one. And I think it's a fun journey, but when I was recording it, I knew in the back of my head, listen, you might be struggling. Listening back on this episode is not a struggle. Like, it was recording it, but I think it's pretty smooth. But I was like, dude, the ending is spectacular. The ending with this guy's troubled life. He's made a checklist. And the stuff that's on the, like, just making the checklist itself would be like, oh, and he tells you to make a checklist. Don't do that, guys. Don't take this advice. It'll make you look like a serial killer. But knowing what that list was and how ridiculous it was, the demon that no one will believe me about, what does that even mean? So it was funny that I knew that and same thing with like a Hans episode. I knew the theory itself, monkeys don't exist, is funny. But you just can't go, there's a guy who believes that monkeys don't exist. You kind of have to set it up and build that. And kind of build he thinks the color orange is satanic. I kind of had to weave that. And that episode was super difficult to record as well. But I knew that there was a juicy orange in the middle of that, where the orange is hanging out just off a tree. I knew there was a juicy orange in that tree. So Rage Cat, thank you so much for recommending this. It was a ball re-listening to. And the next episode, no one recommended as a classics episode, but I got to cover it. I want to cover it this season. It's The Food Replicator. We're actually going to cover the sequel to this episode because I got a lot of background, a lot of stuff on that one that you guys are going to want to tune in for that one. So join us next Dead Rabbit Radio. Trust me, you're going to want to hear about this. Tune into the next Dead Rabbit Radio Classics episode. Have a great day, guys.